Brought to you by Telehelping, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Hall. I am the host of The Faces, Entrepreneurs Are People Too, and the founding CEO of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization, and the herein bill payer of this podcast. So I appreciate Telehelping for allowing me to spend an hour of my day talking to cool people like Justin. Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, Justin, I'm super excited. I oftentimes, and just like we were doing beforehand, I want to run away and have a conversation. But before we go too far down any one rabbit hole, go ahead, tell the people who we're chatting with here today. Who's Justin?
Yeah, okay. I started, I guess my story kind of starts when I was a young kid. My brother bought Personal Power from Tony Robbins off of an infomercial in like the 80s. I was little. I was like 8. And I thought it was really cool that he said, just listen to it whenever you want. Do whatever you want with it, because it was like $300. And I knew back then that's like $12,000 today,
Yeah.
So I thought it was a pretty cool thing for him to do. And I just got fired up listening to this big guy, Banana Hands, just get people motivated and get excited and roar. He's full of energy. And I thought that'd be a pretty cool thing, to have your own business. He'd talk about flying in his helicopter to go to a conference and talk to people. And I thought, wow, that'd be pretty amazing as an 8-year-old, So it kind of lit a fire, planted a seed at least to be an entrepreneur and not really follow the path of having a job and, kind of going through the normal sort of path that was encouraged, I guess. Then my path kind of winded through a lot of different challenges and trials, from some drug addiction and rehabilitation to an early marriage, kids, family, getting out of rehab, building a business that was successful, grew that really quickly into nearly 9 figures. And then had all that stripped away and stolen from me, embezzled, by bringing some of the wrong people into my life that really took advantage of me. To then just kind of figuring out how to put it together again, piece by piece, and deal with some of the financial challenges and litigation challenges that came as a result of that chapter. So that's the broad brushstrokes there. So anywhere you want to dive in,
So it sounds like life isn't a straight line. It's a conversation that I had with my wife not too long back, where I was like, it would be easy if life was a straight line, right? Get out of college, you go to a good job, you grow at that job, you go to another company, right? But it's like, you get out of college, it's hard to find a job. You get hired, that job sucks. So you're looking for another job, right? And you go to a startup, it fails. And now you're going back down to where you're getting paid at college, which is nothing.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like what you expressed is a winding road. So, that's interesting that you've expressed the double-sidedness of a human, which is what The Face is, the whole podcast is about, is the fact that this guy over here starting a business, divorce, right? Has a life over here, which probably liked, and then the business is having all these financial issues. So let's, I think that what I really want to hit on first is talk to me about, the divorce side of things. Like you're trying to run a business over here, and, I've been divorced twice actually. And so like, I know what it's like to be an entrepreneur. Like, I'm just going to hold it all together for my company, and my life's falling apart. So like, how was balancing all that?
Yeah. And so for the record, I am still married, and that's kind of a miracle in and of itself, that the same woman through all these trials. So she deserves some props there, big time in that, because through it all, from the addiction side of things and trying to maintain some sort of a story that I was holding it together. That was before I started a business, but I was in sales, and that was the sales environment is kind of what got me into the drugs a little bit. It was easier to get in that environment. But then it was, trying to hold that family life together. I wouldn't have been able to do it without rehab. Now that I have the benefit of hindsight, like holding both of those things together, like trying to figure out how to deal with the family, trying to patch up a fractured marriage that was very strained because of several years of addiction and lies and the behaviors that go along with it that you would assume. and then trying to pour everything into this new business, like without the tools and the frameworks that I gained inside of rehab for those 6 weeks that I was there, no way, like no chance.
How is making that decision to go to rehab? I know that as myself, someone who's struggled with mental health challenges, right? Not only from life and then the military and then being an entrepreneur, all of them, right? My conditions are a very high probability of mental health, and I had it straight across the line. It took me a long time to sit down with a therapist, right, and actually have a conversation. And generally, it's because I realized that there was a basement to rock bottom. Like rock bottom has a basement, and so that's where I'm like,
or go downstairs.
I was like, so let's talk to a therapist. And then I was in therapy for every week for 2 years. And so how was making that decision to go to the rehab and get the help?
Excellent question. I'm glad we're going that direction, because that is something that I feel like is a part of my calling in life now, honestly, Cody, where if I had a magic wand, one of my wishes would be to just somehow figure out how out of my mouth or through my experience or something that I could do to show people that are struggling with some of those things just how good it can be and how worth it going into that setting is. And it was the short version to the answer to your question is the grace of God is the only thing that got me there. I was arrested twice in as many months with possession of drugs. The first time I was trying to cover my tracks and act like, it was not a big deal. It was a one-time thing. And then bam,
Happened again.
Just a few weeks. And that's when everybody in life, like all of my family who just saw me go through this a minute ago, just a couple of weeks before. And I was in jail the first time for 10 days before I was bailed out. And the second time I was like, we're not bailing you out. I mean, dude, that was like a minute ago and you're already back. Come on. And so same thing.
Yeah.
And I guess what really hit me and why, I put so much energy into trying to avoid that because it just felt like going into that kind of a setting was going to be the death of me. I remember how scared I was to consider that it wasn't even an option. No way. Before all that, I dozens of times I'd try to fight getting off of pain pills and heroin and really, really nasty stuff like toxic chemicals that just destroy, and the withdrawal syndromes and everything was so bad. But after that second time in jail, I had an attorney that my mother paid for because I was completely strapped and broke.
Mom.
Yeah. He shows up and is talking to me through the glass and says, well, after calling me a dumbass and a few things, just kind of silly, he's like, well, what I think we can do is if we do this, and then what I think we could try to hope for is maybe like 3 to 5 years. I just went. That was like a punch right in the guts, just hard. I was like, hang on, what? What was that? I had a 2-year-old and a baby, and he just said that my best case scenario was to try to shoot for 3 to 5 years in prison. He clarified that. He said it again, and I'm like, Ed, no. I have a baby, man. I have a 2-year-old, and he's like, what the fuck do you want me to do? Yeah, I'm not a magician. You've been pinched twice in 2 months with really nasty substances that the government doesn't like. I'm sorry, pal. You're probably gonna go to prison for a while. And that's where I was like, you gotta come up with something else. He did come up with a plan. He's like, it's a Hail Mary, but the only thing that I could possibly put together is if we try to delay your date in court as long as possible, and through that same period of time, you are perfect. Beyond reproach in any sense, then maybe we can get leniency and show the judge that the time served plus the track record and, you repaying your debt to society, yada, 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 maybe you don't go to prison. And if you do, maybe it's only for 6 months. And I was like, oh man. Okay. So what is the next step? Get your ass to rehab. When can I go?
First step. Yeah.
Yep. So that's honestly, Cody, without that compelling motivation, I don't know that I could have done it because it seems so hard, so scary.
It's one of those things. My mother lives in my casita. My mom wasn't in my life most of the time, because she got caught with felony possession with intent to distribute. And so, and she ended up doing 5, getting out, violating parole, doing 5 more, right? And so most of my life I was raised by my grandmother, so I understand from the perspective of the family member what it's like for you to go through that. And I can only imagine, I was sitting there chatting with a buddy of mine who did some very illegal things, and I was chatting with him on the phone after I had bailed him out, right? I got him out because I'm not going to let one of my Marine Corps buddies sit in prison. I'm going to bail him out. He was sitting there. He's like, I don't know what to do, man. My lawyer says I could get 25 years. And he's like, I'll be 58 years old when I get out of jail. Right. He's like, I just had a kid last year. He's like, my kid's going to be an adult. He's like, I don't know what to do. I said, whatever it is you have to do. Right. Whatever. And, he luckily, was cooperative. Right. And got off that. But, what really helped him was finding a purpose. And it was through a divine path. Right. And his faith. And I think that is something that a lot of people find. And I think oftentimes, regardless of, I won't take a stance here. I'll keep it broad for everybody. But, the stance is that I think that oftentimes faith pushes you to where you need to meet it. Right. And so you can understand its value. And so, I think that what it does oftentimes is it strips away, life strips away kind of what we hold to be rocks in our river. And then, as the rapids get bigger, these rocks lose grip, they fly away, right? Maybe it's your friends that they go away first, right? And then some of your family members, and you're sitting there with your wife and, Jesus at that point, right? And you're like, I got 2 things I'm holding on to. One of them, your wife is barely holding on. So what a challenge, right? And so I think that's and I oftentimes see that that's such an incredible place to build a base on, though, right?
Oh, for sure.
Because that's a hell of a foundation.
And it's clear, right, Cody? Like, it's not, I like your metaphor of all these rocks and different things. You're trying to hold it together. You're trying to keep the pieces. And that's what kept me so terrified from even entertaining the idea of going to a rehab or getting real therapy. I did therapy before that, but it was to check a box so that somebody else saw me go to therapy just long enough to get them off my ass. But when I actually had those rocks stripped away, inside of rehab is when I began to learn more about myself and what was making me tick and what pushed me and my internal buttons to actually make really stupid decisions when I got backed into a corner, and instead of actually dealing with it, just getting high, doing something else to cope, to numb.
Correct.
And that purpose that you describe is what I worked on when I got out. And without it, like, I had the frameworks and the tools from the rehab, then the purpose upon getting out of rehab. Otherwise I'd be dead, man. I'd have been long gone by now.
I think that's such an incredible thing. We struggle with things all the time. Every person listening right now has a struggle, right? And it reminds me of something that's on the Atlanta airport. When you're coming down the trams, and if you've ever been to Atlanta airport, right, the underground tram goes to all different gates. Coming down the tram, it says in big words, everyone's dealing with something, right? Yeah. And every time I see that, I'm like, hell if that's not the truth. Right. And, oftentimes I have found in my life, the thing that has always masked my problems has been my success. And so, because everyone always just sees your success. Oh, he's making money. He has things. He has stuff. He's going places. So everything must be good. Right. But then you have, things over here corroding, like little things that the battles that you have going on. And sometimes those things end up being possession of illegal substances that land you in trouble. Right. Yeah. And so that's a challenge. Right. And so when you were coming out of this journey, what took you to the phase of entrepreneurship? Like, was this a part of that? Or did you feel like, okay, you know what, I'm going to come out, I'm going to do something, I'm going to bury myself into it? Because funny enough, I think that you have to be a little damaged to be an entrepreneur, right? I am not normal, Right, right. I'm not. I'm a really strange person, right? I'm not socially awkward, but I'm different. So the way I go through life, and so my wife's like strange human, right? I find that damage, that those cracks, those scars, oftentimes lead people to entrepreneurs. So was that like a catalyst that led you in this direction?
Yeah, I think so. And we have a founders hike every Tuesday morning where we invite anybody here in town that's building something or wants to. We just get together before it gets too hot and we go out for a little walk and chat. One of the guys there today was talking about 20 years in an IT job, and now he's trying to become an entrepreneur. And one of his struggles is like, how do I stay, like, there's days I'm not motivated. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of part of the deal, man.
Tell it.
So you gotta create systems that force you to get things done, because the days you're not motivated are probably going to outweigh the days you are. But to answer your question, I think, well, it was a turning point in rehab. And like I said, I like psychology. I like learning how the mind works. That's why I was in a sales job before, because I was regurgitating Tony Robbins speeches and, the authors that I liked that spoke about how the mind works. And that's how I'd pitch deals. That's how I'd sell. And inside of rehab, I was like, okay, forget it. I don't really care. I just want to get healthy. I want to get clean. I want to get out of here and get back to my family. I got a wife, 2 kids. So I remember clearly the moment in a little group session where the leader of the group, his name was Dr. Bob. He looked like Santa. He's an old man, big white beard, fat dude. I love that guy. He really saved my ass. But in this particular group, I said something to the effect of, I will flip burgers at McDonald's for the rest of my life if I can just be out, healthy, and have my family. And he goes, you dumb motherfucker. And I was like, whoa, Santa doesn't, you can't talk like that, Santa.
No, Santa.
So sorry for the foul words, but that's what part of what he did to kind of push my buttons and get me to perk up and listen is strategically place F-bomb in there that I was like, wait, what did you say? It's like, you're dumber than I thought you were if you're going to get out of there and go into some stupid dead-end job that doesn't have any purpose for you or meaning to you, because if you do that, I'll see you right back in here in 2 weeks. And that was like 2 synapses connected together, and I was like, wait, that makes sense. Okay. So when I got out of rehab, I began working on a couple of projects that one was a short-term contract deal that I was done with in a few weeks. And then I started to put together the ideas of a business, working with some friends that were in this space. And that was it. It was basically, I need to know if I can work on something by myself alone and figure it out for a long period of time. Just one thing, not I got this going and this going. I was always trying to be a mover and a shaker, but I was acting too big for my britches. I didn't really have anything that I could lean on as a success story, and so I just started putting one foot in front of the other. And it was that clarity that started me down that entrepreneurial path. And so was I damaged and broken? For sure. And probably a little chip on my shoulder, had something to prove that let's see if I can do this on my own and not have a scapegoat or some excuse as to why I can't. And that's really kind of what got me started down that path.
Yeah. I think that one thing I see with entrepreneurs as well is we don't like to admit that we're new, right? Yeah, I think that's a big thing. We always like, oh, well, we always say we peacock, right? We're putting a face on to show like, oh, our feathers are bigger than we actually are, right? And I think that I've done it most of my career, right? And rightfully so. In many cases, I found myself talking to people who are multi-billion-dollar companies. I'm like, let me convince these people that we can do what they're asking, right? Yeah. We can do it. I know I can do it. I just need you to give me the opportunity. So I'm going to peacock a little bit to be like, hey, we're bigger. But sometimes, it's actually worked in my favor to be like, hey, listen, we are small, young, scrappy, and nimble, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think that, I'm new to this industry, which is why we do it differently, right? Yeah. So, which is, we don't fall into the, monotony that is what, virtual staffing is, for example. People are like, oh, you never run a virtual staffing company before. But I go, no, but I hate everything about every virtual staffing company I've hired. when I hired 35 remote nurses, I hated it. I hated my experience. I hated the company I worked with.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I hated the experience so much. I started my own company. Like, if that's not a pissed off consumer, I don't know what is. Right. I'm like, I'm going to start a whole venture just because you guys suck. And so, and I think that is a heck of a catalyst that gets you going in the right direction. So,
yeah, for sure.
Well, chat with me about this saint you call a wife in your family, right? Shifting gear a little bit over to the family, like, how's things with them now that you've kind of been to this journey together? Because they're not always the same, right? And it's, for sometimes for better.
Yeah. I think, the jury's still out on some of this stuff for sure, but I've got,
of course,
going back to the beginning of that story with, not the beginning, but some of the early stages of getting out of rehab, it was the frameworks there that gave me the tools to know that leaving rehab, I felt great. I was clear, I was healthy, I was sober. But part of, luckily, thank goodness, the training was the world's not going to meet you where you are. They're going to meet you where you left them 2 months ago. And I was in jail. Just so let's remember that. I was like, oh yeah, that seems like so long ago. But, I had a couple of years of lying about everything to try to cover my tracks. So what happened in starting a business after that is, I'm sleeping on my mom's floor with a wife and 2 kids in a 2-bedroom house that's little. And, she probably wanted to kill me. Like, actually, she's working for a minimum wage job to get some grocery money. And I just knew the situation was getting worse and worse and worse, being in that just so tough, literally sleeping on the living room floor. But I knew that I had to keep striving down this path. And so it was those tools that I got there in rehab that allowed me to do that, where before I would have just buckled. I would have buckled. I would have felt the pressure. I would have said, okay, let's go do this. Got a bad job, made a little bit more money to patch it up and just cover the surface level fractures while not addressing any of the foundation. And I didn't do it that way this time. So we worked on the foundation, and we found some really some miracles took place where we were able to get into a new house without paying for it. It was a nice house. Somebody was a speculator, and we got to live there for a year and a half rent free. And that allowed us to start rebuilding and putting things back together. And now our journey wasn't all sunshine and roses from there, but with such deep cuts and wounds and breaks, healing, bringing them together and working through it. Again, the frameworks that I got in rehab allowed me to just start that process and really gave me the tools so that I wasn't just winging it. We built something that was much stronger. And now we've gone through ups and downs and moved our family across the country. We've raised 4 kids. My youngest is 15, about to turn 15. My oldest is 23 and just graduated college. So there's a lot of challenges in life that you face and a lot of different chapters that, one of the things I see younger parents sometimes with their kids getting frustrated. And I just think, those problems were so easy. They want to sucker, and that because when your kid's 20, they don't want to sucker. Okay, it doesn't solve anything, and the problems have a little bit deeper consequences when they screw things up. That back then just gave us a blueprint to continue to operate off of. But we've had to keep coming back, and you mentioned something, that purpose and the grace and the faith. Without them, we'd be smoked, man. We got purpose to help drive us. And just recently, COVID in New England was tough for us. Our kids were at just critical stages and ages of development, where a senior in high school and they spent their senior year at home in my house, within arm's reach of me all day long. And there was no going out. And
you said so many incredible things, Justin. I think oftentimes, I'm not, so tuned into what someone's saying all the time, but I let you say the entire story because, wow, what a story, right? And so, we have all types of entrepreneurs who come on the podcast, foreign immigrants who've fought diversity, and adversity coming into the country, folks nationally, right, who fought it. But, I enjoy the stories that hit a little closer to home, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I too like have been down like that path in the family setting, and experience how that could, your situation. I love that you've taken what life has given you and built a foundation out of it, because I see
Mm-hmm.
so many people not do that, right? And so like, not, one thing you said really was like, oh, like, wow, that's exactly what they do. Like when my mom came back around, for her, right, it had been 6, 7, 8 years, right,
Yeah.
and so all this time has passed for her. For us, it was like day one,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh,
Right.
wow, you're back. That's cool. We're
Yeah.
teenagers now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're 15, right? And
Wow.
so like we have opinions, and so it took so much
Sometimes
to
bad
be.
one.
So you know what? It's an interesting opinion at that age, because I have a bonus daughter, who comes into my life as well, and she's not my biggest fan because we had a huge legal battle with her dad, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so over custody, right? It's amazing. Someone wanted custody after they realized that their daughter was calling someone else father. So, right, and then this whole year and a half battle ensued. It was some really tough times, right? It was some really tough times. And then you're sitting there at going through all of it. You're like, wow, this was really tough. Like, did we make the right decisions? All this is going on. And then like, a year and a half later, my wife and I looking at each other like, I don't see how we could have achieved what we achieved in that time period if we had had our daughter with us. And that is a really challenging statement to say out loud, right? Because you fight for custody for a child, and then you're sitting here like, wow, like imagine how difficult this past 3 years would have been if we had a new teenager living in our house at the same. It was tough with her
Yeah.
2.5 hours away, right? And by plane, like that was tough. To have her now, like in the house, would have been impossible. It would have been impossible, and that was a big thing as parents to be like, could we have done that successfully? Probably not, to be honest with you. I don't, and I think that was tough for my wife, being that her biological daughter was like, man, I feel like a bad mom saying this out loud, but sometimes things happen for a reason, because you're right, what you said. They know just enough, right? And I say this, and this is really applicable to employees at a company, right? Sometimes they know just enough to make a statement that's true, right? But they don't have enough context to understand the wisdom behind those decisions, right?
Right.
And so they'll like jab you and like, ooh, that is true. You are not wrong. But right, there was a lot of things went into making
that.
Yeah. It's like, do I hear all the time, like, do you reduce, companies who struggle with cash flow? Do you reduce people's pay, or do you fire people? Right. Well, let's consider the consequences. Like, yes, you could fire them. Now no one has any pay, right?
Right.
And so, or do you, trim across the board for maybe a company who's paying too much to everyone anyways, right? And so there's a lot to be learned from that. A lot to be taken from the challenges we face. Good, bad, hard to tell, as I always say.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about your business. Like, what is this organization that you run, sir?
Yeah. Well, as a result of some of the challenges that I faced, so just to make a brief backstory, getting into litigation with a former partner and some guys that had done some bad things to us. We had to fight through some administrative challenges and things. So I was always not good with numbers. So I had somebody else who was helping me with those numbers, with the tax returns, with all that stuff that is not in my wheelhouse, sort of thing. I had to spend 5 years making that my wheelhouse, just under 5 years in litigation. So I had to hire accountants and lawyers and forensic accountants and all kinds of stuff, and learn things that I just terrified me before that. So again, life kind of gives you these ways of learning the lessons that you're maybe too thick-headed to pick up on your own. So with that, I had a friend. One friend asked me once, like, don't you have like accountants to work for you now? Could you help me do my payroll? Like, I need to hire somebody. So I said yes to her, just one. And then she called a few other people. And then I had 3 or 4 people. We were doing payroll and books, keeping track of their books. Within a year, we had 50 clients because they just all told their friends. And so we're like, well, it helps offset some of the labor payroll that we're working on this lawsuit. So sure. And last year, so we were doing that business and helping people. And I like it because I had struggled with that topic so much. Like it had cost me so much in terms of money, time, pain, just by avoiding it.
Yeah.
So I loved bringing these people in that were just like me, that didn't really like that side of business, and saying, no, don't worry about it. Look, I can help you I'll take what they say, I'll translate it so that you understand what they say, and then we'll just make it work for you. And that was fun. But as I tried to start scaling, I tried to get this purpose back a couple years ago, and really poured everything into scaling that business. And everything I did was just met with resistance and friction. And it just, all these counter forces were coming at me. And I realized it's not the bookkeeping that I like. It's the actual coaching and consulting and working with people, helping them understand the mindset of what books and records and tax strategy. Like I was doing a coaching session in March. I was just talking about this woman the other day, and she had paid over 100. She'd just done a tax return, had 137,000 or something in tax liability. It was over six figures, and almost like 150 ish. She was pissed because the CPA that she went to in March, which you don't go to a CPA in March. Okay, they're smoked. That's the first time she talked to this person ever. She's like, I can't believe this guy wanted to charge me $7,000 for a tax return, and then he tells me that I owe the government $150,000. And I said, okay, let's just take a look at something. We spent an hour together going through just some ideas. I didn't pull out receipts. I'm not an accountant. I'm not nearly that smart. Just gave her some ideas and paradigms. She went back and spent 6 hours in her own record, gathered receipts. We talked about the vehicle that she had bought that year and how it was a business vehicle. She didn't tell the accountant about that. Went and had her taxes done again, saved over $100,000 in payments to the government between her state and federal taxes. So when I can see something like that happen from a conversation that will continue, she'll get better and better and better with that process every year now. I love that stuff. So at the end of last year, I sold off the bookkeeping business, except for like 3 or 4 clients who refused to leave. So we kept a few of them, but everybody else went with, and it was a perfect separation. We had an accountant who had been here for 10, 12 years, and they had great relationships with our other clients, and they're off doing their things. We still send them some of our business now that comes in new, and our team is much smaller. We focus on creating content, and trying to get this message out to help other people avoid some of the mistakes and some of the tax liabilities. Like I was talking to another young woman just last month, and I was telling her to meet with a CPA, go talk to an accountant. She came back in the next week's call and said, yeah, I called a few guys. I don't know. I don't think it's for me. I said, wait, tax strategy, like having an accountant isn't for you? She said, yeah. She was a young lady. She's like, I just feel like you're talking down to me and trying to make me feel stupid. I'm like, you didn't follow my process. I told you to call 6 or 8. You have to talk to 6 or 8 of them. Yeah. And she's like, I know, but they're like $250 to $300 an hour. And I said, what? What did you pay in taxes last year? She said $97,000 of income taxes between state and federal. So if you could cut that in half, you're not willing to pay $300 an hour 3 or 4 times a year to have a CPA talk to you, like, come on, what are you doing? So
people they take short-term losses, and
to not feel silly, right?
To not feel silly, and they're like, oh, and then they end up paying for it later on. Yeah. It's called discounting the future for the present. It's a pit hole that many entrepreneurs fall into.
For sure. I've heard the definition of discipline being said as giving up what you want now for what you really want. So trading that short term, that now, with what you ultimately want.
It's just, I think that we have to understand that entrepreneurs as a whole, like, you're going to sacrifice. I mean, my first year and a half at telehelping, I didn't even collect this out. I worked for free. Oh yeah. Right. I actually put money into company every month. I cover the marketing budget for the company every month to advertise, to reach out to people, to have marketers and everything. And so you're like sitting there like, wow, like this kind of sucks. Like I'm paying to work 40 hours plus 60 hours a week. That's really strange math. But you have like it, it's like for what you want, you will sacrifice. If you don't want it, you will not sacrifice, right?
For sure.
They say, show me where you put your money and I'll show you what's important to you. Right. And so you're coaching. I love the idea of coaching. I do a lot of, I only do about 3 clients at a time, but I do some chief marketing officer, fractional chief marketing officer.
Okay.
Mostly around branding, not around like, I don't promise sales, though I do close for a couple of them. If they have like larger relationships, primarily in the accounting space, right? Because accountants aren't people, right? They lack emotional intelligence at large. And so I do a lot of that. And I always sat there and held to them. I'm like, maybe one day I'll do coaching. Like, I like the idea of one, because we do a lot of coaching at telehelping. It's like one of those things, like, of all the jobs I do, I was like, when I get to do coaching, it's super fun, but it's not, it's like the cherry on my milkshake, right? I didn't order the freaking cherry, but I like cherry, right? I ordered the milkshake. And so, we do something called acclimation consulting at telehelping, because I had this thought process when I first started telehelping, right? When people came to me for virtual assistants, I was like, if you want a virtual assistant, it's because you know exactly what you want to do. That was an incorrect statement. So, like, that was the assumption was like, right. And so, after a while of seeing people hire and fail, like I was like, man, we really got to keep them from X amount of time here, because I'm talking about the ratio of cost of client acquisition and lifetime value, right? And I was like, wow, it's super high. I'm like, we got to get that thing down. And so I started doing some consulting. And we started realizing that the small things that we assumed people understood, they didn't understand. Like just the one word delegation. The idea of a person who started a company, when I think about our primary people are accountants, wealth managers, and lawyers, right? Really big jobs that oftentimes people could run their entire life being the only person in their company in those 3 roles. They can run $500,000 $1 million businesses being the only person. Granted, they'll be out of their damn mind, right? And so they'll be busy. And it's hilarious. We'll sit there and we're like, well, have you thought about giving things to like a virtual assistant? Like, you're a lawyer for those. They're my favorite, because they have, they're bar, certified, accredited to practice law. And then they're sitting over here sending 100 emails a day or managing their calendar. I'm like, wow, is that something that you should do? Like, well, I wouldn't even know how to tell someone to do this. I'm like, right. What do you mean you wouldn't know how to tell someone? It's easy. It's like, hey, but as we say in the Marine Corps, smuckatelli. Hey, smuckatelli, right? You're going to do this from now on. And so what we started doing is guiding and supporting people in doing those things. And, that was like year and a half, 2 years into it. We're at 5 years now. Like, now we're seeing that, so many of our client, like our lifetime value of client has gone up because our clients stay longer, right? Sure. And so we our virtual assistants stay longer because, virtual assistants, they'll come work for someone and they'll see that everything's not together, and they'll be like, the hell with this, I'm going to go work with someone else. It happens because they'll get into the environment and they're like, oh, you're going to do this job. You get there and this person has no idea what they're doing, right? It's like we started doing the consulting before, and now we're doing it before we even hire somebody. We're like, hey, Justin, let's figure out how we're going to do this. You have this setup, you don't have this setup. And I'm like, you don't have to, like, I'm sure like you talk to your people, be like, don't lie to me, be honest with me, right? Yeah. Like, you lie to me, I'm going to go take your lies to the team, and they're going to lie to the virtual assistant that we hire, and they're going to quit. And so I'm sure, but I do love the coaching piece, right? Yeah. I guess my question for you is, well, one, how long is your coaching relationships? Because one thing that we struggle with, and I say struggle very, liberally. We don't struggle with it, but it's a thing I'm conscious of, is weaning people off our guidance, right? Okay. Like, I promise an hour of my time to every new client that comes on board, right? I'm like, I will, you tell me what you want to do for an hour, and we'll sit down and we'll attack that problem together. And then I'll give you an action plan, right? Yeah. And then my team will then follow on with the support, because I see a lot of the same issues all the time, right? I'm just going to give them the architectural plans. How do you wean people off, or do wean people off? Is your relationships in perpetuity, or what's that look like?
It can be. That's usually, there's some clients that I have now that I've been working with for 6-7 years. in that range.
Yeah.
2 or 3 of them is all. Most people I work with for 6 to 12 months, and then sometimes they'll renew because it's easy. We work a lot with delegation. That's one of the key tenets of what I like to coach and teach people to do. So when you start talking about delegation and how people don't have
Ears
experience,
perked up.
yeah, 100%. And I have part of my delegation framework is that you need 2 things to be present in order to do that effectively. One is the right mindset. And like you just mentioned with the lawyer, I wouldn't even know where or how. Mindset problem, you first have to address that, because if you don't have a mindset that it's possible, then you can't even start going down that road. And the second thing would be the systems. So you need mindset and systems. And with that, you kind of create, to me, that's sort of like a flywheel mechanism that if you can continue to grow and evolve and kind of level up as you're doing that. I work with people, most often it's revenue based, because there's problems that exist, and there's 2 ends of a spectrum that we kind of see these problems come in at more times than not. And one is down at like that $250, $400, $500,000 of annual revenue. There's a certain set of problems that are there. And then upwards of like 2, 3, or 4 million in that range, there's a certain set of problems there. And for people that have made it past that, they have probably surpassed or kind of they've gone beyond these sets of problems that are typically in this range.
To new problems.
What's that?
To new problems.
Definitely new problems. But they've learned how to bring in different kinds of operators. They've learned how to develop higher level people. They've learned how to find and retain higher level people to where they're hiring a COO. If they're at $6, $8, $10 million, they're usually not in there doing the $30 tasks that we see the big mindset problems with at these lower levels. And I've got guys that we work with now. They're doing $3 million a year, and they still spend their time thinking that they are the operators in the field. They are, that they're a plumber.
Yes.
No, you're not a plumber anymore. You run a plumbing company, but you're not a plumber anymore, man.
Yeah.
You need to do quotes. You need to do sales. You need to do leadership. And so delegating with the right mindset and systems so that you grow your time, your bandwidth, not necessarily your business. Because these guys that are on the broken entrepreneurs, like you talk about, these people that have this drive that something screws loose, they're going to go out there and work for free for 2 years to build some business that hopefully starts to pay them.
Hopefully, right?
Grow. Yeah, they will grow. You give them more time and show them how to deploy that time back into the right, proper tactics, they'll succeed. So one of the other things that I like to get into is like a delegation pyramid that starts with the bottom, and with our trades guys, they understand this clearly, because you don't build a house from the roof down. You build a house from the bottom up, and you start with the foundation. You start in and under the ground. So that is administrative back office stuff. Don't delegate anything else until you've delegated this stuff. Get a VA, for hell's sakes. Get that. Don't send 100 emails when you're a lawyer and you can charge $500 an hour for your time.
But Justin, people do that because we get caught, and we call it the chief executive of everything, the CEO, right? Yep. And so it's so funny. These people, they want to do everything. It's like, well, I'm my business. I'm my business. Like, well, that's why you're working 7 days a week, 80 hours a week, right? And your buddies are playing golf, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so because it's a learned behavior, right? When we talked about, like you said, the difference between 250,000 to 2.5 million, right? Well, we think when we're at 2.5 million that doing what we did at 250,000 is going to get us to 5 million, right?
Correct.
And that is not the case. I myself, when I started telehelping and I started getting to, we were at like our $1 million mark, my company operated like a $5 million company because I knew where I was going. Yeah. Right. I already wasn't managing clients, right? I already wasn't managing recruiting. I wasn't managing operations every day. I wasn't in the finances doing all the bookkeeping, everything. Like, I had a team of 5 of $1 million business. And I sat there and I used to have a conversation with my wife. So I'm like, man, I could probably make personally another $10,000 a month if I just did more. Right. And she's like, yeah, but then you'd be working right now. Like
Totally.
we're sitting at a bar, right, at the beach,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
And that's why I talk to people. And one of the first things I ask everybody is like, like, hey, listen, we're gonna get to what you want to do, but answer me this: are you trying to keep your business where it's at and do less, right? Because $1 million business that you could, our average price is $1,500 a month for a full-time person. So imagine if you could have $1 million business and then hand off 40 hours a week, right? That $1 million just became so much more valuable to you. I'm like, is that what we're trying to do? Or are we trying to turn $1 million to $5 million? Because those approaches are much different approaches,
Totally.
right? Like, how are we approaching? And so, some people are like, well, I'd like to start off with this and that. We're like, well, let's pick one. We got to pick a door, right, Dorothy? Okay. Right. This is the Wizard of Oz, right? And so I just think it's an incredible thing that you have those conversations with people. And I'm glad someone's having, and they should. I would love to, I'd love to refer people to you, right?
Okay.
Because I to this day, will still have conversations with you like, oh, I don't know what my virtual assistant's doing. I only use them for 50% of the week. And I was like, well, tell me what you're doing with them first, right? And then tell me all the things you're doing. Like, let's figure out what we can put in their bucket that you're doing over here, right? First and foremost, did you send this email to me? Let's talk about it, right? And so, like, I have that conversation with you all the time. Like LinkedIn, right? Like, hey, because I love reverse selling on LinkedIn, and I did it. It's funny enough to be, I'm a funny person. At least and just so everyone knows, my punchlines are for me. They're not for you, right? And so I used to always be like, when people, like, I'm just like, if you didn't laugh, I'm sorry, you weren't in on the cut. Right. But I would always be like, hey, listen, like, thank you for reaching out to me. I'm like, I don't really need your services. However, have you considered using a virtual assistant? They're like, oh, I don't need virtual assistants. I'm like, well, how many of these messages do you send out a day? Right.
Yeah.
Right. And how much time have you burned doing this that you could have been probably doing something else? Right.
Exactly.
And, I've had people come and, say that the delegation piece is just so huge. And it was shocking to me because delegation is an art. I want to pause there, everybody. We understand you. I get it. I've messed up delegating 1,000 times. Right. It is an art, because then it comes into, like, now you've delegated. How do you manage? Right. Go back to the Marine Corps, inspect what I expect. Right.
No, I'm going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Right.
Verbatim. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's a challenge, because you delegate, you didn't know how to delegate, you delegated. Now you got a new problem. So,
right.
And basically what we're going to call this entire podcast is whack-a-mole. Right. That's what being an entrepreneur is. Whack-a-mole.
Yeah, for sure. For sure it is. I want to go back. I like your two doors, back to Oz, because yes, it's a different approach if you want to keep your $1 million business and just have a better lifestyle, or if you want to take this million to a 5 million. There's a different tactic to go through that door, but right behind both doors is time. And that's what's common. If you can get time back, whether it's either door, you're winning, right? The difference is, what do you do at that time once you go through the door? That's where the path starts to get real different.
That's, Justin, that's an incredible thing too, because when I picked door number one, I picked time. When I first started really delegating, because I was like, oh, I'm running a virtual assistant company, but I'm doing everything. My wife and I are doing everything. I was like, man, that seems really weird. We should have virtual assistants. Right. So, and then I started off like, oh, wait, well, okay. Because it was horrible, because we could never travel anymore. We'd always be working, because we both work for the business. So then I virtual assistant her job away. Right. And took her job away. Right. And then I started handing off my job. And what was challenging about that is, at first, like, when I didn't have much to do, nowadays, all I do is sales calls. Like, I only do the sales calls, right? In this podcast, actually. And so this is my job, guys.
Yeah.
But then I was like, what you said there was interesting, because you said time. And then I enjoyed it for a while, right? I enjoyed getting off, or some days not even working. If I didn't have a sales call, I didn't work. Right. I did a quick check-in call. All things are good. No fires. Clients are happy. Great. Next. And then I had all this time, and that ran its course. And I was like, you know what? I think it's time to scale. Right. But I had the time.
That's the key. Right. So you got to deploy your time in a different direction. So behind door number 1, you found the time, which is the same thing you'd need behind door number 2. Well, you went through 1, traveled down that path for a while, maybe worked on your tan a bit, had a good time, enjoyed it.
But then, the backhand, the forehand.
Yeah. And then you discovered, like, maybe my purpose is to scale a little bit more. So you came back to that purpose driver, which kind of gave you a backward path back into door number 2, and you start growing because you have the time that you can deploy. That's something that we do with our clients, is getting through that first, the mindset and the systems to begin delegating. And then what's the driver? What's the purpose? What's the North Star up here that you're actually looking at? And I learned this the hard way with one of my early clients years ago, like a decade ago. And we got a bunch of her time back. I didn't know there was 2 doors. I was just like, go through a door, whatever. Pick a door, any door, we'll get you more time back. She got that time back and started to build a business with more systems that was more predictable. And she just really felt trapped by her business. Well, she got back a lot of time and began offloading a lot of stuff to VAs, to in-house people that were hired and bad people let go. And through this whole thing, she was just building her mindset. But what we didn't touch on back then is what to do with the time that you just got back in your calendar. So I remember a call from her 4 months in or something. She called me. She was pissed, started screaming at me, yelling at me. And she's like, yeah, I'm paying you all this money and you're doing all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, I thought things were going good. And I'm kind of like, what's going on? But at the time, we were doing the books too. So I looked at the finances because I had visibility right into her finances because it was our team helping keep the books and records. And I'm like, what the hell, man? That just last week, I got Louis Vuitton for $5,000. I got like all these different things. She was spending the time shopping.
Oh,
so she would leave work.
That's a problem.
And she'd go to the mall. So not only was she gained a whole bunch of this time back, didn't know exactly how to put it back into the business because she just felt like she was trapped for so many years. Yeah. She would blow off steam at the mall, which gave her a financial pinch. Like she felt the squeeze. Didn't really want to face the fact that it was Louis Vuitton and other silly brands that were getting so much of her money and wanted to call and yell at me. So we solved it with something pretty simple. I like little simple frameworks to start that are just not that complicated. And we scheduled for her a pedicure every other week and a massage once a month. No kidding. It was like, You need time for you. So no more shopping. You got to stop with the shopping. It was a lot. She was spending a lot of money. And that stopped. She got a pedicure. And that rotation, that cycle, was enough for her to feel like she's pampering herself. She was doing something, but then deployed all that time back in the business. She sold within 1 year. She sold for millions of dollars, exited her business. And a year before that, she couldn't make payroll. Like she couldn't pay. It was just amazing to see that transformation because we told her to get a pedicure twice a month. It was just phenomenal.
I love it. And Justin, I think simplicity is the key to everything. Like don't make uncomplicated things complicated. The Marine Corps is USMC, uncomplicated shit made complicated, right? I was a great Marine at my job, horrible to the establishment because I was like, wait, we're doing this because we've done this because we've always done it, right? This is how we've always done it. Don't do that. And I was like, what's the easiest way we can accomplish the greatest outcome, right? And I realized everyone always called me lazy, right? But really, I was just trying to figure out how do I expense the least amount of energy, time, or money, right? Mm-hmm. To accomplish something at a greater expense of someone else who's trying. I said to my brother once, he's like, I made $150,000 this year. I was like, yeah, but you are a plumber in Utah, right? And so you were digging ditches in January. So let's talk about that. Justin, I think it's been a great conversation, and I love what you're doing. I love your story, and I can see why your enthusiasm and your approach is able to benefit people and their businesses. So, sir, I appreciate you taking the time to do my podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun. I look forward to seeing how it turns out.
Oh, no, it's going to be great. I'd listen. I don't listen to any of the podcasts, but I'd listen to myself on this one. So good job. Well, sir, thank you so much. I'll be well. I'll tell you soon.
Thanks, Cody. Take care.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelp Ing. Need support for your business?
Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.